All right, so we're diving deep again today and going back to prehistoric Britain. But we're looking at it maybe a little differently. What if there was way more water?
Yeah, much more water.
What if, like, the rivers were huge and the landscape was nothing like we imagine it?
Yeah, that's right. And thinking about, how that might have affected the people who lived there.
Right, like maybe they weren't just walking everywhere.
Exactly. A boat society.
Yeah. So let's talk about evidence.
Yeah.
You sent over some sources about these things called river terraces.
Right.
So are we talking like ancient mega rivers?
Yeah, kind of. So imagine a river. It's much bigger than the rivers that we see today. Over thousands of years, it's carving its way through the landscape. And as it cuts deeper and deeper, it leaves behind these kind of steps
Oh, right.
along the valley sides, and those are river terraces. Each one marks a past level of the river. So the higher the terrace, the older it is, and the higher the water level used to be.
And the sources talk about the River Avon as a really good example of this.
Yeah, exactly. The River Avon is a great example. It's like a history of the river is written in the landscape,
Wow.
in those terraces.
So there's also a lot of talk about how they date these terraces. And it sounds like that's where it gets a little bit complicated.
Yeah, so scientists use a method called optically stimulated luminescence,
Mm.
OSL for short, to date the terraces. And it measures how long ago the sediment was last exposed to sunlight. So it gives us a time frame. But in the River Avon case, some of the dates don't quite match up with what you'd expect if you just look at how high the terraces are.
So are we saying that some of them might actually be younger than we thought?
Well, that's what some researchers are starting to think. Events like massive floods, for example, during the Holocene period could have reset the dating clock for some of the sediment and made them appear younger than they actually are.
Wow. So like a single flood could really just mess up our whole understanding of like thousands of years.
It definitely highlights the challenges of, interpreting the landscape and understanding how these landscapes have changed over time.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder what else we might have gotten wrong about the dates.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So let's say we've got these massive rivers in prehistoric Britain.
Uh-huh.
What were people actually doing on them? One of the sources mentioned that they found wheat in the Solent.
Yeah, that's right.
And the Solent's underwater now, right? So
That's right, yeah.
unless they had underwater farms, which I doubt, that means they were probably boating, right?
Yeah, it must have been dry land at some point, and people were growing crops there.
Right.
And to get it there, they must have been transporting it by boat.
Okay, so that actually fits in with the other source that you sent that mentions that they found an 11-meter-long boat in Derbyshire.
Yeah.
That thing could carry a ton. Are we thinking like prehistoric people shipping cargo around? Maybe building materials?
Well, we know they were using boats. And we know that they could have been transporting things.
Right.
And that boat in Derbyshire could have carried a lot of weight, maybe even heavy stones,
Okay, and then one of the sources also describes a catamaran that was found in Wales.
Right.
And it was specifically designed to transport large stones.
It was.
Wait, a catamaran like what we sail today?
Yeah, pretty much. This catamaran really highlights the ingenuity and skill of these people.
Wow. So they were engineering some pretty complex vessels.
Yeah, it really challenges the image of, just simple canoes.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got these potentially huge rivers all over prehistoric Britain. We've got evidence that they had boats that could carry heavy loads. And we've got evidence that they were moving stuff around, maybe even stones for building.
Yeah, potentially.
That really paints a different picture than what we normally think of when we think of prehistoric Britain.
It does. It challenges that traditional narrative, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
So we've got this potential boat society, maybe even transporting heavy cargo. Do we see any evidence of this in the monuments themselves, like Stonehenge?
Yeah, that's a great question. And your sources point to some pretty interesting possibilities. So Stonehenge, we always think about the alignments with the sun and moon, right?
Yeah.
But what if there's more to it?
Okay.
What if those alignments are also about water?
So were people approaching Stonehenge by boat?
That's a really interesting idea. And there's evidence that, the avenue might have even been a flooded valley at some point.
Wow.
They've actually found post holes and what look like loading platforms along the avenue, and that could be signs of changing shorelines and adaptations to fluctuating water levels.
So Stonehenge wasn't just a ceremonial site on dry land. It was like a hub connected to this network of waterways. People arrived by boat, they maybe traded goods there, unloaded those massive stones. It's like a prehistoric port.
It's a really compelling idea. And it's not just Stonehenge either. Durrington Walls, another massive henge monument near Stonehenge, is interesting too because it's not actually a full circle. It's more like a half-moon shape with the open side facing the River Avon.
So they just didn't finish it.
Well, that's what some people think, but what if it was intentional?
Okay.
What if Durrington Walls was actually designed with that open side facing the river to create kind of a natural harbor?
Okay, so a place where boats could dock and unload.
Exactly. You can imagine people sailing up the River Avon, pulling into Durrington Walls, unloading goods, maybe even those bluestones we talked about earlier. And there's actually evidence to support this. Magnetometer surveys have reviewed ditches that extend from Durrington Walls towards the east, and those could be signs of them trying to maintain access to the river as water levels changed.
Oh, wow. So as the landscape changed, they were literally digging their way back to the water, trying to hold on to this way of life.
That's one interpretation, yeah.
Wow. But was this just a local thing around Stonehenge, or are we talking about something more widespread?
Well, your sources actually suggest it might have been much more widespread. They point to similar landscape features at other major sites like Avebury.
Avebury. That place is just as mind-boggling as Stonehenge.
It is, isn't it? And at Avebury, there's this newly discovered stone avenue called Silbury Avenue. We can only see it now as crop marks, but it's believed to have connected Avebury to Silbury Hill, that massive, mysterious mound.
Wait, Silbury Hill, that giant man-made hill, what does that have to do with water?
Well, imagine Silbury Hill, this massive thing towering over the landscape. It could have been a beacon, like a navigational landmark for people approaching Avebury by boat. Like a prehistoric lighthouse?
A giant hill as a navigation point. Okay, so this Silbury Avenue, it connected all the way to Avebury.
Yeah, and the sources even speculate that Avebury, with its access to the Kennet River, could have been a major trading center, like a hub.
Wow.
For boats coming and going from all over the region.
So they were thinking on such a massive scale.
It seems like it.
This is incredible. This whole episode has been one aha moment after another. This is a completely different way of understanding prehistoric Britain.
It really is. It's a new perspective.
Yeah, it makes you think, like, how much we still don't know, right?
Right.
This boat society thing is a whole new dimension to prehistoric Britain.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating to think about how, these new perspectives can change our understanding of the past.
Totally. So we've talked about the physical evidence, the rivers, the boats, the monuments. But what about the people? Did they have any, practices or beliefs that might reflect this connection to water?
Well, your sources mentioned excarnation.
Excarnation.
Leaving bodies exposed to the elements, to decompose.
Yeah.
And it was a common burial ritual in prehistoric Britain. But what if it was more than just, a way of disposing of the dead?
Okay, yeah. What else could it be about?
Imagine a culture where water is, central to everything.
Yeah.
Their lives, their beliefs, their worldview.
Right.
Exposing bodies to the elements, maybe near water, could have been seen as, a way of returning them to nature, Maybe even facilitating a journey to the afterlife or something.
I like that.
Yeah.
And that makes even more sense when you think about where they put those long barrows, those burial mounds.
Right.
A lot of them are up on hillsides overlooking these valleys that probably would have been flooded in the past.
Yeah.
So what if those placements weren't random? What if they were chosen to be visible from the water?
Yeah, like markers.
Yeah.
Memorials.
Yeah.
For people who are navigating the rivers.
I can just picture, sailing along these ancient waterways and seeing those long barrows, silhouetted against the sky, a constant reminder of those who came before.
Yeah, it's a powerful image.
So speaking of connections, what about the cursus?
Ah, the cursus.
That massive earthwork near Stonehenge.
2 miles long.
Yeah, and nobody really knows what it was for.
Yeah, it's been a mystery for centuries. But your sources suggest a new interpretation. Remember those alignment points we talked about as Stonehenge? The heel stone and the station stones?
Yeah, I remember.
Okay, well, if you overlay the cursus on a map of those ancient waterways, it actually seems to align perfectly with a potential boat crossing point between two rivers.
Are we saying the cursus was like a bridge? A prehistoric causeway connecting two sides of a valley.
It's possible. And not just any crossing point. One that aligned with those key markers at Stonehenge.
So they were thinking on that big of a scale.
That level of planning, it's incredible. Yeah.
So we started with the idea of bigger rivers in prehistoric Britain, and now we're talking about like a completely different way of life. A society connected by water, using sophisticated boats, building these incredible monuments aligned with the landscape and the stars. Yeah, it's amazing to think about, what other secrets are still waiting to be uncovered.
Yeah. I mean, this boat society theory is just the beginning, really.
Yeah. It's a call to reconsider everything we thought we knew about prehistoric Britain.
Totally. Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was fascinating.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this incredible journey. We hope you've enjoyed it. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and who knows, maybe you'll be the one to uncover the next big revelation about our prehistoric past.